It's Writers Dream Time again. This is a show where writers can talk about how they write their books, how they publish their books, and how they market their books. You can find The Writer's Dream on YouTube, and you can find us on Facebook. If you have a question for me or you would like to be on the show, please message me through the Facebook page. If you go on our YouTube channel, you can see over 125 authors talking about how they write, how they publish, and how they market. There's a lot of good information there. If you are a new writer or even an experienced writer, get to see what writers are saying. Today's guest is George Rottkamp, and he is a author of Life with Liddy, Cancel My Bully subscription. It is a comic book, a graphic novel, I should say, and George is an illustrator as well. So George, tell us about Life with Liddy.
Well, Life with Liddy is a story about a girl named Liddy who's entering middle school for the first time. And she is excited to learn and make new friends, but unfortunately the transition isn't as smooth as she expected because she encounters a few bullies that tease her and make fun of her about her self-image or just in general. And she has to try to find different solutions to overcome these types of issues. So her main goal is to try to promote cooperation, confidence, and friendship to create a better social environment for other students.
Okay, so this is, of course, a very timely topic, bullying. We're talking about bullying in a lot of different venues. What made you choose a comic book?
Well, because I've always loved drawing cartoons, like, ever since I was a kid, and I've done that for many years, just practicing, getting better with it. And so for senior project in college, we had to make a design campaign, and so I wanted to do something with cartooning. So I decided I'll try to make some sort of like visual storytelling with that and make a comic book. So I decided to make a story based on something that I've experienced growing up and try to take a negative experience and turn it into a positive one through a medium that I feel most comfortable expressing myself.
Okay, so your job pretty much, your main job is as an illustrator. You want to talk about that a little?
Yes. So, I mean, I got into being an author because of wanting to make a visual narrative, but as far as being an illustrator, I went to school for graphic design, and I wanted to take my skill as like a cartoonist as well as what I learned from graphic design to be able to work in that field. So I do some freelance work, freelance comic strips for a website called Dorkly, and so whenever they have a script, they throw it at me, and then I come up with the illustrations for that comic strip. And I'm also working on a a joint project with a friend of mine on a fantasy card game for like 13 and older. It's got a lot of different things like magic, swords, so every project is a little bit different and not necessarily has to do with writing, but this is my first endeavor to try to like write something out myself.
Now, is this going to be a video game or is it going to be a comic book?
Oh, what, the card game?
Yeah.
The card game's like physical cards, like playing cards kind of thing. You shuffle the deck and you deal it out to people.
I see. Okay. So what I like to point out is that comic books, which are now called graphic novels, have won a great deal of popularity lately. And many of the authors that I have on are authors of children's literature or they're authors of young adult literature. And all of us feel, especially the teachers amongst us, that we really need to get our kids to read. And so the trend now is to even convert Shakespeare into comic book format. Now, comic books, when I was a kid, were very popular. I mean, I think they've always been popular since their innovation. And I remember on Sunday reading the funnies with my father, and the funnies are really comic books, only they're serialized.
Right.
So I just want to read a little bit from this article because I think it's important. Throughout history, comics have had a pretty hard time in the literary world. The authors suggest the art form has long been bruised by the opinion that they are nothing but crude, poorly drawn, you must love that, semi-literate, cheap, disposable kid fare. It wasn't until the late 60s when the medium apparently shed its superhero skin and seemed to evolve into a new beast entirely, the graphic novel. That illustrated narratives came to be seen as more than just picture books for children until they moved over to real books. It's not just academics and serious readers who are ambivalent. Comic lovers themselves have been cynical over whether the medium can be considered literature, not graphic and not novel. I know that I'm very interested in the Outlander series, and there are 8 novels, each of 1,000 pages.
Oh, wow.
To get kids to read 1,000 pages. The books are fascinating, but I have noticed that the author, working with an illustrator, has come up with a graphic novel version of the first book.
Oh, that's neat.
So, because I think these books cleaned up a little bit, because there's a lot of sex in them and language and whatnot. Cleaned up a little would be very interesting for kids because they also are a reflection of history. They deal a lot, the later books, with American history. So I think that there's a real opportunity here to get kids interested in reading. I know when I was a teacher and parents would come, I would always ask the parents, do they read? And when they said no, I said they have to read. You have to get them to read something. And I would say, I don't care if it's a comic book or a car magazine, would get them to read because reading develops the brain. So I don't know. I'm not ambivalent about this idea. I think it's a great idea.
I agree.
Yes, because this would be career-wise. So I don't know how interested you are in moving into another aspect of your career, but I would certainly contact some of these people who are making these, who are converting Shakespeare into a comic book. Shakespeare and other works, I think. What did they say here? Go ahead.
I mean, if they did that, it would have me interested because, like, I obviously like to read graphic novels and comics.
And you would like to illustrate.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, even Scholastic, I heard, it has like a graphics thing. It's like Scholastic Graphics, where they are doing like a whole bunch of different graphic novels themselves, and they're like 100+ pages. So that's how they're getting a lot of kids to get into reading. So even something like that, they're moving in a direction to try and use more of a visual narrative to draw more kids in to read more.
Sure. Well, I mean, if I have the Outlander novels, and they're this thick, and the print is this big, and I do them on Kindle because I can adjust the size of the print. And I'm an avid reader, and I'm also an adult. But if I were a kid and somebody handed me this book and said, "This is a really great book," the first thing that happens with kids in a library, you probably remember this, is if I took my kids into the library and said, you have to pick a book to read, the first thing they would look at is how thick the book was and how big the print was. So I think that we have to do something to overcome this, and I think our culture is such that it's, first of all, very visual. Just look at the internet. Everything on the internet is very visual, the video games and all of that kind of stuff. So why not inject some good ideas and good literature into a format that is acceptable to kids?
It's always growing
My
and
English
evolving.
teacher friends are going to kill me, but such as it is. Okay, so so tell me about what you've done to, how did you publish this, first of all?
This book is currently self-published, so I wanted to see like where it would fit at first, so I got it printed at a local printer, and I was able to go to a couple of different schools to see like what teachers and like students would think about it, like Garden City Middle School and Seaford being the most recent. So I would get them printed locally and then go there, and I gave a couple presentations to the students, and they would ask questions about like bullying and how to make a comic book and how they could make their own comics, and the teachers liked it as well. So they bought several books for like all of the 6th graders at Seaford. So I just wanted to see how it would fit into like my target market first, because I was aiming for students going into transitioning into middle school where bullying becomes a little bit more prevalent. So it seems like that market is working out.
I think you have two things going for you here, though. First of all, it's the topic. And then if you want to do more, you have to think of some more topics, maybe speaking with the English teachers or the social workers in schools. What are the other issues that kids are dealing with? And the other thing is just coming up with the actual physical book. Because I know if you take a course in a video course in making your own video show, for instance, even this show, one of the things that we could have done is a storyboard on how the show would progress. So that's pretty much
It's
like
very
a comic
similar.
book. Yeah.
It's just
So-
blocking out how you want it to go. It's like an outline almost, like how you would outline a book, but storyboarding is like outlining what
Sure.
you're going to see.
I mean, I kind of do that with my books with those great big Post-its. You know, they're like 2 feet by 3 feet. And then I'll put, because it's a mystery, I'll put the clues, and then I do a flow chart through the chapters because it all has to come out in the end. It all has to tie together. And while you're writing the book and all the other things that are going on in the book, you kind of forget, oh yeah, that clue. What did I do with that? So that kind of thing, that visual graphic representation of what you're doing is pretty much like a comic book. Now, have you looked into having this traditionally published?
I think I've shown it to a few publishers just to see like if it would be a good fit for them, or if this could be like used as like a portfolio so that I could do work for them and work on other books. I mentioned Scholastic before. I saw a panel of theirs at Comic-Con a few days ago, and they have like their graphics division was saying that they're going to have a contest where they could get some people, whoever entered like their own books or stories, that maybe they could get published at some point. So I'm looking into that, seeing if that's a potential option for the future of Life of Liddy. But as of right now, it's just self-published.
Yeah, well, that's how many of us get started. And what have you done to market the book?
Marketing, it's strange. I've been calling a lot of schools and trying to break in that way, like social workers, teachers, principals. And some people don't really know what to do with you when you call them. They're just like, oh,
Yeah,
it
right.
sounds like a great resource, but they don't know what to do with it.
That's why you have to present them with a program.
Right. And so just by chance, I talked to somebody on the train that gave me a couple of connections with like the schools I talked about before, like Garden City and Seaford. And so then that just grew. So as far as marketing, for me, it's been being in the right place at the right time and happening to talk to the right people that want to push this type of idea. Because from what I've heard, I mean, there are stories that revolve around bullying, but I'm not sure how many comic books do it.
Yeah, I don't know of any. I mean, I'm not an expert on that, but I never come across any. I've come across like novels, regular, like little short stories that are illustrated, but not in comic book format. I think that when you call a school or any place to do a presentation, have you tried libraries?
I tried my local library, and they didn't.
They're tough libraries.
They were a little bit hard to get through too, so maybe I have to try other ones.
Yeah, but what you need to do is to get a portfolio together with an actual step-by-step presentation so they know exactly what you need from them, what you are going to do as far as a program is concerned, because they're bombarded by so many ideas, and unless they have something really specific, it's very hard to get through them. I mean, our connection is through a career day.
Yeah.
Which was, it isn't exactly the best thing for you because you want to get paid for what you do. And this is all volunteer. A lot of stuff that you do with schools is volunteer. But still in all, you were able to, I think, make the school aware. Now, Seaford had you come in as a guest speaker, right?
Yeah, I came in as a guest speaker, and I gave several presentations to the entire 6th grade class.
Yeah.
So
How were you received? Did you enjoy it?
I did enjoy it a lot, actually. It was such a great experience because up until that point, I've been talking to like a lot of like older people trying to like pitch the idea, and then that was one of the first times that I got to deal with students, and they all seemed like really engaged, like they were like paying attention. They weren't talking during the presentation, and then afterward, like while I was drawing on,
Asked you a million questions. Right?
yeah, they had me draw on the marker board, like I was drawing the main character while they were asking questions, and they were asking so many questions like, how'd you make the book, like my experience with bullying growing up, and how they could make their own books. So like, it was just really cool seeing how
excited.
how excited and interested and like invested in it they were just for the short amount of time that I was there.
Yeah, so that's, you might want to expand on that. You might want to do something, like with a PowerPoint and for school assemblies and whatnot.
I mean, it was a PowerPoint pretty much.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got all sorts of pictures.
Me
and
too, I do that PowerPoint thing. I like it, it makes it easier. I mean, even if you don't like just refer to picture, it kind of keeps you on track and there are visuals for people to look at.
Exactly.
So, but I think that, have you thought about making this into a video?
I was thinking about doing like a video presentation kind of a thing, just like have it on YouTube so that people could see it, kind of similar to the ones that I've already given to the schools, because I give a lot of information. I go into like all the details of like how I got into making the book and how it relates to my life and how I want students to learn along with the characters so that they could learn different solutions or even brainstorm different solutions to combat bullying in their community.
Yeah, so, and also with animation. Can you do animation?
I don't have much experience with animation necessarily. I mean, I could see it in motion like in my head, but it takes a lot of work and effort to draw like frame by frame each picture.
Yeah.
So that would be a whole nother project entirely for just me.
I can imagine. So tell me, because I don't know, and tell the audience, how do you start? What are the steps? How do you get from the beginning to the end?
So it's kind of like, I would assume it's kind of like writing a novel where you have to outline it and, fine-tune the script. But it takes a lot more than that also, because especially if you're taking the mantle as the illustrator as well, because then not only do you need the story, but you need to lay out every page so that it matches the story. So you have to like roughly sketch it out and have the layout be the way that you want it, and then you go over that with finer pencils so that it looks a little bit more cleaned up, and then you go over that again with clean black digital ink so it looks more professional. Then you block in the colors, the shading, the highlights, and then eventually somewhere in there you put in like the word balloons where you tell the story. Mm-hmm. So all those pieces put together, it's a lot of work, but like when you see the final product, I know that I'm like really happy with it, and it's just like this is how I envisioned it in my head, and it took a lot to get to this point, but it was worth it.
No, I like the fact that you, in the beginning of the book, you have the 4 characters.
Right.
Now, I see there are no male characters here.
Not at the moment. I had a book that I did before this for a senior project which had a male character. He was like the bully.